today, but before I do that, I'll quickly go over what we've done in the previous two episodes that is related directly to this. So we looked at the determination of exchange rate. What determines exchange rate in the short run and in the long run. And we also had a bit of historical perspective on that. Though that was brief, but I will quickly go over that. Broadly, you can categorize monetary regime in two kinds. One kind of monetary regime that was based on gold in the earlier days. It's called the gold standard. Money supply was linked to gold. Gold was effectively the base money, the final money. And then we had the fiat money, where you have a dealing from gold, and where the amount of money to be issued is decided by the central bank on various transactions. Gold is kept aside insofar as monetary aspects of the economy are concerned. Now, in the earlier days when it was gold-based monetary, then as I said earlier too, the price of each currency was fixed in terms of gold, which in turn implied that the price of one currency was fixed in terms of the other currency. Indirectly, the exchange rates get in those times there was to cut the long story short and to keep some complication aside, by and large it was a story of fixed exchange rates. It was a story of stable exchange rates. It was a story of absence of any currency risk. Now, of course, that had its other problems, but we need not go into that, which is why the government world over eventually decided to move away from gold standards. But in this context, there was broadly a silent fact that there was a currency price. Once we moved to fiat money regime, we had some plus points. We also had some minus points, and one of them was this. But before we come to why this happens, just to recapitulate how exchange rates are determined in the context of fiat money. Fiat money, again, you can have fixed exchange rates and you can have flexible exchange rates. If it is fixed exchange rates, then of course it is decided by the central bank. If it is flexible, it's market determined, and in the last class we looked at how exchange rates get determined in the short run and in the long run. We looked at the role of purchasing power parity in the long run context as the underlying determining factor. But we also saw that in the short run it could be a matter of capital flows, interest rates, current account deficits or surpluses. So these two together would play a role in determining the exchange rate.
In the short run, is there any word speculative trades that happen directly? How they impact the short-term exchange rate? Because a lot of money is moving around just for speculative purposes can have a significant impact on the exchange rate.
Yes. So in fact, in the last class, when I started with the determination of the exchange rate, I started by saying that it is the short-term interest rate which determines the current exchange rate. If you remember, I said that the price levels are sluggish, so purchasing power parity is not really meaningful, relevant. Also, output you can keep aside. So there it was the interest rate. If you recall, the diagram was that you have return rate on dollar debt instruments and you have return rate on euro debt instruments. Yes. So it is the active speculative in the market which is what gives you the current exchange rate. The active is what the speculative was speculative.
So suggestion comes because the short-term interest rate
Yes. So if the interest rate on rupee is high, you will have an inflow, rupee goes up. Well, that was precisely the story that you were getting. But these are the short-term movements. I am calling the movements, there is some fluctuation, but there isn't a crisis. It's just moving from day to day, whether it is in Europe or US or India.
So if you would think any movement in exchange rate as a whole, so would you say that it will be broken down into several factors, that one would be because of short-term exchange rate, one would be in terms of the price differential, and accordingly it was stated that which portion has how much impact on the forward.
Yes.
So will there be a portion of this aspect which would not be explained by any of these? For example, let me say if exchange rate change has changed by 1 rupee, so the rupee has depreciated by 1 rupee against the dollar.
Well, one factor that could play a role, which is not connected with price or interest rate, is sentiment in the market. Now, this is started more in the context of stock market volatility. But to some extent, it plays a role even in currency markets. Sentiment is in favor of one currency or against one currency, and accordingly the exchange rate is floated, and it has not much to do with even the interest rate, even like the price levels which are a part of the purchasing power parity. And of course, you can relate this in terms to politics, political competitions, news. So these are non-economic factors. But they would still be part of the fundamentals. So you have the economic fundamentals and you have the non-economic fundamentals. But other than fundamentals, you can also have sentiment, which is in one sense an irrelevant factor, but in another sense it plays an important role in the market.
How does the, again, very, very theoretical question, when we talk about, say, money in a domestic economy context, we have something called money multiplier. Does this phenomena will not be operative in the international context also? Suppose the US, Japan, and other countries are printing a lot of money, and this money is flowing to developing countries. Effectively, the multiplier potentially can be infinite. So there is no CRR or anything operating on those balances. And that can suddenly inundate the world economy into liquidity excess, which the world as a large right now is talking about.
I was to come to it later, but since you have raised...
if you come in cover later, that's okay.
I'll take it up right now. Take the example of the Fed, and now of course it's also the European Central Bank. Both are issuing a lot of money, and the concern is that that money can flow into emerging economies. You have plenty of liquidity, and that can in turn destabilize conditions in emerging economies. There is a part of it which is correct, there is a part of it which is incorrect. One part is familiar, that it will flow, which is the interest rate part. The interest rates are low there, the return rates are high in the emerging economy, so you have a tendency for capital flows. That is the correct, valid part. The other part, which is incorrect, or if not incorrect, it is a bit exaggerated, is that the Fed issues more money, and that leads to more liquidity and more money flowing in. Now that part needs to be put a little more carefully. In the US, if you look at the graphs, I wish I had data on that here, but I'll try to get it for the next lecture. If you look at time on the x-axis and you take base money or high-powered money, which is the money that the central bank issues. And if you look at that, then around, let's say, 2008, whatever the crisis date, after which the US Fed became very active and it increased the base money considerably. So you had a story like this. It had been expanding over time, but thereafter there was a huge jump. So if you look at the trend line from that, it is the jump, and that is what is being talked about. And since you have too much money being issued there, what is the impact on emerging economies? The financial markets there, the currency markets. Now, this is the base money. If you take a look at the diagram for money, so you have money and you have base money. So if you relate these two, I used a simple form of that relationship, the money multiplier that was talked about. So this is H for base money, or it stands for high-powered money. In some places it's called high-powered money, in some places it's called base money. It means the same thing. The term we use in India is more high-powered money. Now, this is the currency deposit ratio. Remember, money is here broadly defined as currency plus bank deposits. So, this is the ratio between these two forms of money, and this is the reserve deposit ratio. And what has happened is that this stage is what has gone up considerably post 2007, 2008, thereabout. But there is another thing which has happened, and that is that the reserves which commercial banks are holding the other thing that has happened is that the reserves that the commercial banks are holding, that has gone up considerably. So the banks are not lending to firms, and since the bank credit is low, they have to have that money in some form. They are holding it as reserves with the central bank, which means that the reserve deposit ratio is high. Now look at this formula. If you like, in another lecture I can explain this in more detail. I will be glad to do that. But for the moment I will take that as you may have come across this in some form or the other. Things that are happening. If the currency deposit ratio and the reserve deposit ratio remain constant, then any increase in high-powered money or base money would lead to an increase in the total amount of money in the economy. That's straightforward. This whole thing is a positive number. So any increase in base money leads to an increase in money in the economy. And for people in the economy, what is relevant is the money in the economy, not the base money. So that's at the base of, as the name suggests, at the base of the total money. But post 2008, what has happened is that high-powered money has gone up, but the reserve deposit ratio has gone up. Now, observe that reserve deposit ratio is the denominator. So, if this goes up and this goes up, then the money may not go up much. So, if you look at the data on money, and let us say, if you use the same diagram, you would probably have something like this. It may show some increase in flow, but not much. So the amount of money hasn't gone up very much in the US economy, which is why you also don't have inflation in the US economy, meaning above trend inflation rate. There is inflation in the US, despite so much pumping in of base money by the Fed, the money stays the same, and therefore the price level trend also, if you take P here and P here, it's more or less going at its trend. At 2008, there is no departure from that, and which is what Nancy has been emphasizing again and again, that there isn't an inflation danger, and in case there is some danger at some stage, we will take care to reverse the policy. This is the multiplier. So the money economy is a multiple of the base money. The base money is small in quantity compared to the total of this, and it is this multiplier relationship that we have. Now, in normal circumstances, the money multiplier you can take to be by and large fixed. So, for example, from in this time interval, the money multiplier you can take as fixed. The currency deposit ratio more or less fixed, the reserve deposit ratio more or less fixed. So the money multiplier is more or less fixed. And so you have a stable relationship between base money and money. But at this point of time, when the central bank is intervening by increasing rates considerably, there is something working to the advantage of the central bank. And what is working to the advantage of the central bank is that the commercial banks are not lending out.
So the multiplier cannot reduce.
So the multiplier is reduced. Now, of course, it is keeping inflation in check. It is helping the central bank. It is helping the government. But the negative side is that the bank credit have not moved. So if you look at the recession part of the economy, that is related to this. Partly related to this. I'm not saying that's the entire story. And not only that, the Fed has done another thing, which is the usual thing to do is to give a zero interest rate on this, or a very low rate of interest. For simplicity, take it at zero rate of interest. So if Citibank has reserves with the Fed, then the Fed is not paying interest on that. Okay. Now, sometime on the way, what the Fed started doing was to start paying interest on these reserves. It seems that the motivation for doing that was to give an incentive to the banks to continue to hold reserves. Now, of course, that helps insofar as controlling inflation is concerned. But the other part of it is that implicitly you are also not encouraging the banks to lend out to the firms. And in that, it is the medium-sized firms, small firms, which will be affected more.
So, this is the extra money that is being pumped into the economy through the bank. So the banks are primarily holding in the form of government securities rather than lending out to the public.
Not exactly. The commercial banks are not holding government securities very much. They are holding Fed money.
They are putting as reserves there.
Deposits with the Fed.
Deposits with the Fed. So, if you like, you can say that they are lending the money to the Fed. What you said was that they are investing in government securities. But you have found that the commercial banks are lending to the government. That happened in India under the SLR ratio and under the excess government bond holding that we have in India. But in the US, it's primarily a story of commercial banks holding Fed money. Now the Fed in turn invests in government securities. So it is partly to take care of the US debt crisis. I was not terribly touching on that, but since you mentioned that, the US now they are claiming that despite the public debt, US is a stable economy, the financial system is strong, and that despite the rating cut of the US debt, US government debt, there is still demand for it. But what is not being said is that the market for US government bonds is of late being supported by the Fed. about 75% of the new issues, don't misunderstand, the total stock is a lot, but of the new issues, about 75% is being picked up by the Fed. And the Fed is in turn being able to do that because it is issuing this, and in a sense it is being financed by commercial banks who are holding a lot of reserves.
Two clarifications. One is that still does not create a situation that the money does not flow out of the US. Despite the extra money which has come in, some part is going back to the Federal Reserve. As you mentioned, by the banks putting this.
But money is not expanding in the country.
No, that is the US you're talking about.
Yes.
What about the international liquidity? That's US dollar is 60% of the world reserve currency also. So maybe what you're saying, this by default has to happen. If my rate of return is much lower in the US, the money H to M is unlikely to change very much, but dollar H to the international M, the multiplier in the international context, like especially developing country problem and all, that is going to become increasingly aggravated, because if you look at the Indian situation, for instance, say in recent times, I don't know about the China and must be other countries also having similar problems, you are having a situation in which the money growth in India, the base money, is increasing not because government is now asking the RBI to print money, but because now the foreign investment is coming into India, and that is coming partly because it's chasing returns basically, let me put it that way.
Yes. So, as I said in the beginning, there are two parts to it. One is the more valid part, the second is the less valid part. The second less valid part is that the money is increasing in the US, which it is not. But the other part is that, which is the correct part, and which is the source of the problem in the emerging economy, which is that even if it is not leading to a lot of money in the US economy, it is leading to low interest rates in the US and also in Europe. So given that the interest rates in the West are low and given that the returns are high, you have a capital flow. So the capital flow is due to differential in the return rate. It is not due to an extra money. That is the part that I wanted to emphasize.
No, what I'm trying to say is that will that not increase the vulnerability of the...
It does. But it does because these are capital flows which are moving in. These can be volatile. If there is a change of policy, the interest rates go up in the West, this money would move back quickly. That is the volatile part. Sure.
And the second point about the US inflation not going up, isn't it a classic situation that if you have a huge undercapacity utilization, why should inflation be at all affected, even if you increase money supply? That's a standard, even Friedman's argument. The Great Depression, if you go back to, what are the criticism Friedman puts forward in the Great Depression, in his study, is that the recession became a depression because the US Fed did not increase sufficiently money supply. Here is a classic example in 2008, where US has increased the base money significantly and still recession is not corrected. Which means the monetary policy has an asymmetric effect in a recession time. Which means monetary policy, when you are cutting closer to the 0% as your liquidity trap situation, is not much of a help.
That's correct. There are two parts to it. Let me put it this way. One is that there is an underlying recession anyway in the economy. In such a case, an increase in money would be inflation. But the kind of monetary expansion that you're talking about there is huge. It's, if I remember the figure correctly, it's from less than $1 billion to some $3 billion. But it's a large thing. Now, we had stagflation in the 70s, which was the case of recession along with inflation. So, just because there is a recession in the US, that does not by itself rule out inflation if there is huge money supply. But what is saying is that it's only the base money which is increasing and not the total money. So, that is playing a role. Stagflation could have been another possibility in the US. But what we have is stagnation or recession, but not inflation. So the 70s kind of story has not repeated itself in the US this time.
But the 70 situation was a supply driven. This is a demand driven problem. Here recession, how do we kind of differentiate the two situations? In the 70s there was a huge oil shock.
Can I request you?
Okay.
I hope I don't lose the class.
No.
Just we can talk.
Okay.
One thing before you go, from the time a lot of yen in the economy system is going to be deflation. But the other,
Bank of Japan.
the Bank of Japan is something around 10 trillion yen in the economy in the next few months. That was has planned. And what the Western countries are saying that because of this yen will depreciate and it will lead to currency wars. So how will this relate to this economy?
Should we take that up at a later stage? Let me first tell you a little about this. I have possible today we have seen another lecture. I am increasingly now moving towards applied things, policies. So we will come to that at a later. So let me move on with this. So here